Way back in 480 BC, you have this showdown for the ages. On one side, a handful of Greek city-states. On the other, the biggest empire the world had ever seen. The fight that followed was short, it was brutal, and technically it was a defeat. But somehow, it went down in history as one of the most heroic stands ever. We're going to break down the Battle of Thermopylae. Everything you need to know about the attitude of this battle is right here in these two words. The Persian king, Xerxes, basically sends a message saying, hey, lay down your weapons. And the Spartan king, Leonidas, sends this back. Molon labe, come and take them. I mean, can you imagine the nerve? It's the perfect way to kick this story off. So what's the backstory here? How did we get to this epic standoff? Well, this whole thing didn't just pop up out of nowhere. This was actually round two. The Persian Empire had tried to conquer Greece before and failed. This time, it wasn't just business, it was personal. And they were coming back to finish the job for good. You gotta understand, this invasion was a decade in the making. 10 years earlier, the Greeks had pulled off a miracle victory at the Battle of Marathon. The new Persian king, Xerxes, was not about to let that stand. He spent years building an absolutely colossal army. This wasn't just about conquering a new territory, it was about total domination. And by the summer of 480 BCE, that massive force was knocking on Greece's front door. Let's just take a second to appreciate how lopsided this was. It's a real David versus Goliath situation, but on a global scale. In one corner, you have the Greeks, a messy collection of little city-states that were just as likely to be fighting each other as anyone else. And in the other corner, you have the Persian Empire, a unified, continent-spanning superpower. Seriously, on paper, this shouldn't have even been a fight. Okay, so just how big was this Persian army we keep talking about? Ancient writers like Herodotus threw around numbers in the millions, which was probably an exaggeration. But even the more realistic modern estimates, the ones that figure out the logistics of it all, land somewhere around 300,000 troops. 300,000. That is an absolutely staggering, overwhelming force for the tiny Greek alliance to deal with.
And if things weren't dramatic enough, you've got this prophecy hanging over everything. The Oracle at Delphi, kind of the ultimate source for cryptic predictions, told the Spartans that one of two things was going to happen. Either their city would be destroyed, or they would lose a king. For Leonidas, that must have been a pretty clear and pretty chilling message. He wasn't just marching off to battle, he was walking right into his destiny. So, you're the Greeks. You're facing impossible odds. What do? Fighting in an open field is basically suicide. You have to get clever. You need a plan that takes the Persians' greatest strength, all those soldiers, and turns it into their biggest weakness. And that brilliant plan all came down to a single location known as the Hot Gates. This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? How on earth do you even begin to fight a force that big? A head-on clash would be over in minutes. The Greeks desperately needed an equalizer, something to level the playing field so it wasn't just about who had more bodies to throw into the fight. And that equalizer has a name, a force multiplier. It's a pretty cool military term, right? It basically means anything that lets a small group punch way, way above its weight class. For the Greeks, their secret weapon wasn't some new kind of sword or armor. No, their force multiplier was geography itself. So here's the genius plan they cooked up. It's a two-pronged attack. First, on land, they block the narrow pass of Thermopylae. It's a natural bottleneck. Think of it like trying to force a highway's worth of traffic down a one-lane street. All those Persian numbers become useless. At the exact same time, the Greek navy would block the nearby straits, making sure the Persians couldn't just get on their ships and sail around them. It was simple, and it was brilliant. Now, we all know the story of the 300 Spartans, and they were absolutely the heart of this defense. But what's super important to remember is that it wasn't just them. The total Greek force was around 7,000 soldiers. Leonidas and his 300 were the elite tip of the spear, for sure, but they were standing shoulder to shoulder with thousands of other brave Greeks from all over the country. All right, the strategy is set. The armies are in place. The battle begins. And for 3 straight days, this small, determined group of Greeks did the impossible. They held back the entire might of the Persian Empire. For 2 full days, the Greek plan worked perfectly, flawlessly. Xerxes just kept throwing wave after wave of his troops, including his own elite special forces, the Immortals, into the pass, and they just got chewed up by the Greek phalanx. The pass basically became a meat grinder. It was working until it wasn't. On the evening of the second day, everything changed. So what broke the stalemate? It wasn't a brilliant military tactic. It was good old-fashioned betrayal.
A local guy named Ephialtes, probably hoping for a big payday, went to Xerxes and told him about a secret mountain trail that went around the Greek position. His name became so infamous that to this day, the Greek word for nightmare is Ephialtes.
So, imagine this. Under the cover of total darkness, the Persian immortals follow this traitor up the mountain path. They manage to surprise and slip past the Greek guards posted there. By the time the sun started to come up, it was too late. The Persians were pouring down the mountain behind the Greek army. The perfect defensive position had just become a death trap.
Leonidas sees what's happening. He knows the game is up. But instead of surrendering, he does something absolutely legendary. He orders the main part of the Greek army to retreat, to get out and live to fight another day. But he and his 300 Spartans would stay. And they weren't alone. 700 soldiers from a city called Thespiae chose to stay with them, along with about 400 Thebans. They would be the rear guard. They would hold the line.
What happened next is almost hard to comprehend. Completely surrounded, this small band of soldiers fought with a ferocity that just shocked the Persians. The ancient historians say that when their spears broke, they used their swords. And when their swords broke, they fought with their bare hands and their teeth. They fought until they were finally overwhelmed, buried under a literal storm of arrows, killed to the very last man.
The fighting stopped. The pass was quiet, except for the sounds of the dying. The battle was over. But this is the exact moment that the legend of Thermopylae really begins, a legend that would echo down through thousands of years of history.
Okay, let's be totally clear about something. From a purely military, tactical point of view, this was a loss for the Greeks, a complete defeat. They failed to hold the pass. The Persian army was through, and the road to Athens was wide open.
So that's the big question, isn't it? If they lost, why are we still talking about it? Why do we see it not as a failure, but as this incredible, glorious moment in history? Because Thermopylae is the ultimate example of a victorious defeat. Their sacrifice turned these men into martyrs, and it fired up the morale of all of Greece. It became this powerful story that proved the Persian war machine could be hurt. And maybe most importantly, their stand bought the Greek forces precious time, enough time for the navy to regroup and prepare for the battle that would ultimately save Greece.
And if you really want to get a sense of the mindset of these fighters, you just have to hear this one story. Someone told one of the Spartans, a guy named Dionysius, that the Persians had so many archers that their arrows would literally block out the sun. And his response was, "So much the better. Then we shall fight our battle in the shade." I mean, the sheer grim confidence of that is just unbelievable. And in the end, this is what's left. The simple poem that was supposedly carved on a monument there. It doesn't brag about glory or victory. It just quietly talks about duty and obedience. It's a powerful, haunting message that leaves us with one final thought. What, in the end, is truly worth fighting for?